So I'm going to record to the cloud, start recording. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm just going to build it all in here. I'm going to change this from a functional app to a class app. All right, and I don't need that line, so we'll take that out. Okay, so I've got the app component here. Hello? Oh, hey, no worries. It must have stopped sharing. How about now? Oh man, I just clicked share. Okay, let me stop sharing. And then share screen. You can see it? All right, awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna put a form in here. We're just gonna do like a login form. So I'll do a form inside of here, and inside for each input, I'll put in a paragraph. For this one, it'll be type equals email, name equals email, placeholder equals email, ARIA label equals email, and that should be it for right now. Perfect. Okay. And then I'm just going to take that and repeat it a couple more times. This one will be type password. The name will be password. The placeholder will be password. The ARIA label will also be password. Okay. And then finally, this one is going to be type submit. The name is submit. The placeholder, there's no placeholder. We'll change it to value is submit. And the ARIA label is submit. Okay, cool. So now we've got this form, and what we want to do is turn it into a controlled input. To do that, we'll just come up and build ourselves some state. And we will say that this.state equals, and we'll just put email as a blank string and password as a blank string. And what we'll do here is we will go ahead and put that as the value of each of these. So it'll just be this.state.email. And now this is a controlled input. It's getting its value directly from state. We will set the value here, this.state.password as well. Now that means you're not really seeing much change over here, but if I come in and I said like the default is tj@thinkful.com, you'll see that that's now filled in, right? And I can go in, but I cannot change anything in these inputs. And that's because of the fact that they're a controlled input means that of course we can't change it. We would be changing state directly, right? And that's one of the like primary rules of React is that you can't directly modify state. That's why set state exists. So what we can do is we can either put it directly on here, like on change equals, and then we got our event, and we say this.set state email to e.target.value. And so that'll grab the value of that input, and now I can change it. And you can kind of think of this like automated cycle that's happening. When I change it, it's updating state, which is then updating the value of that input. It's two-way binding, right? So this is a fully controlled input, which means then in the submit event, right, if we had a submit form equals, and we're going to have to pass the event in so we can prevent default, right? In order to access email and password, we're not going to say e.target.email.value. We can just grab it from state, right? So we can just say we can just say this.state.email, right? And that's our source of truth. The state becomes the single source of truth with controlled inputs, okay? So we'll go ahead and attach that now on submit equals e, and we will say this.submit form, and we'll pass in the event there. Okay. So now we can submit this, and it's going into our submit form. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and copy this on change for our password as well. And now we need to look a little bit at validation. So as of right now, we could type whatever we want. We do have a little bit of validation with the fact that we're using HTML5 tags. So for instance, the fact that we have set the type of this input to email means I can't just type TJ, right? Because if I try to submit this, typing TJ, it says, please include an @ sign. Now Google is like trying to suggest something to me here. Yeah, it's not going to let me get away with it. But it's saying, please include an @ sign. TJ is missing an @ sign. If I have an @ sign, now it's saying I don't have a domain name afterwards. So it gives us a little bit of validation. But we might want to do some additional validation on top of that. So in all likelihood, what we would do is have a separate method called validate email. Okay? And that's going to take in an email address. And then we're going to do our validation there. So we want to, for instance, make sure that email is not a blank string, right? And what we'll most likely do is do email.trim to make sure we'll try to eliminate all of the spaces. And then if it's a blank string, then we're not going to put it in there, right? So if it's not equal to a blank string, then we can go ahead and set state. So this dot set state email to, and we can just say email. Since the variable and the key in our state match, we don't have to repeat it. Okay. So now instead of this dot set state, we're going to call this dot validate email. And we still need e.target.value, but we don't need to put all of this structure in there because that method is now validating and then setting the state for us. So we could add a lot of things to this. You could have like regular expressions. You could verify the data type, if it's a number, if it's a string, etc., in order to set the state. Imagine that if you had a password, so you would want to verify that the password and the confirmation password match. So for password, we probably wouldn't do much, but if we had a confirmation password, we would want to verify that those match. So if I copy and paste this, and we're going to call this one still type password, but the name is validate password, and the placeholder is validate password, and the ARIA label is validate password. The value here is going to be, when we're going to come up into state, we're going to say validate password. Okay, and so that's going to be our state value. So go ahead and grab that. And then we're going to copy and paste this validate email for right now. And we will call this validate password. Okay. All right. And then we've got our, we will just bring in, we don't really need, yeah, we'll bring in our validate password. There we go. Okay, perfect. So I'll get rid of that. And what we'll do down here is instead of calling this.setState, we'll call validate password, and we will pass in e.target.value. Perfect. All right, so what do we want to do inside of here? Well, password itself is directly still updating state, and I think that's fine. We could do some things with password where we kind of verify, does it have at least one number, a special character, one uppercase symbol, is it at least a length of 6 and a length of 8, things like that. And we can do that. We'll do that here inside of validate password. We're going to validate both of them. Okay, so we're also going to say let password equal this.state.password. We could also shortcut this by having like so. All right, and so there's a couple things we want to do here. First, if validate password does not equal password, well, now we've got a problem, right? So we would do something like maybe put up an alert that says passwords do not match. Okay. And then we can add some additional down here. What I like to do when I'm validating is do like an if, else, if. Okay. So if, else, if, was there a question? No. Okay. Else if, let's say password.length is less than 6, or password.length is greater than, let's say 18, right? So we'll say, yeah, greater than 18. Then we'll alert passwords must be between 6 and 18 characters. So again, you can kind of go through this one at a time, and then finally else. This dot set state password. We're not doing anything actually with password. We can do validate password is fine. And yeah, so that's fine. So basically, as we're changing the password, we're going to verify if they match. Now, the problem right now is if I put in like a test and then I type T, I get passwords don't match. Okay. And now I've lost my password. Let's make sure I pass it in correctly. E.target, validate password. Yes, validate password, validate password. Oh, okay, I see. We're actually going to run this regardless. We shouldn't say else, sorry. Because we always want to update state. All right, perfect. So if I start to type, it says passwords don't match because it's running after each one. Passwords don't match. And I have to get each one in there. And then if I type again, I'm still getting passwords don't match even though they do. Okay, now I'm getting the characters don't match. So what I could do instead is I can, instead of alerting, I should return something from this validate password. Or what I can ideally do is come up here and say email error is blank, password error is blank, okay? And so what we typically will do is put these right above or below the inputs, right? So I think for myself, I would put the email right here. We're gonna do P, whoops. And then we're gonna say this.state.email error, okay? Now I'll probably put like a class name on this of error so that if an error does show up, right, I can go ahead and try to style that. So I can say .error is color of red, right? So that it at least stands out to the user a little bit. So I'll do the same thing down here for the password error, except I'm going to put that right below the validate password. And this will be this.state.password error. Okay. And so instead of alerting, what I'm going to do is this.setState password error. Okay. And then I'm going to put that error message that I came up with inside the state. So then the idea is that and you've probably seen some sites that do this, like while you're typing, it's verifying your password and giving you errors like, hey, these don't match. And of course you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I know they don't match. I'm still passing, right? So as I'm typing, so you can see as soon as they matched, my error message changed to passwords must be between 6 and 8 characters. Okay, so now I'm going to do that. Okay, so now I've put in 8 characters, and now the passwords, it says the passwords do not match. Let's make sure that I put this in correctly. They do match. All right, we'll have to check that out. It could just be that it's stay over. So we want to make sure that not only do we set validate password, but that we set password error to an empty string. Okay, so let's try it one more time. Test, test. No, I'm getting nothing. Okay, and that's because I want to put this in an else. So let's do that. We'll say else this.setState password error. We'll set it back to blank. So if everything was fine, we'll make sure that we clear out that error. Test, test. They don't match. They must be between 6. Okay, let me put a longer one in there, and there we go. So now I currently do not have any errors, right? Which is what I want to check in my submit form. So in submit form, I'm just going to say if this.state.email error is equal to a blank string, and this.state.password error is equal to a blank string, right? If that's correct, then I can go ahead and submit this off, right? Otherwise, I'm not going to do anything, right? So that means while you have an active error, so what we'll do here is we'll just say like alert submitted, right? Just so that we can see it working. So as I have an active error, if I hit submit, nothing happens, right? I can also kind of do something here to make sure that these are both inputted by putting required on both of them so that I don't submit. We might have to because of React say, oh no, there we go, perfect. So I can't submit even if I type this in. Currently, I don't have a password error, but if I start to type in a password, there we go. I've got an error, and if I hit submit, nothing happens. Now, if I change this to testing and hit submit, I get submitted. So you can see it's very straightforward, and you can scale up from this pretty easily and have these individual methods for each input and slowly scale up your validation for each one. Okay, so we've rendered the errors out. We validated the entire form. We've made sure that we cannot submit. Another thing, and this is something that they mentioned in the curriculum, is not only should we have the if here, but you could come down to this input here, and you could put a disabled property on this button. And you could say it's disabled if this dot state dot email error is not equal to a blank string, or this dot state dot password error is not equal to a blank string, right? And so you're basically just checking to see if that's true. If either of those are true, the submit button will be disabled. So watch, as soon as I have an error, I can't even click on submit, right? Pretty awesome. So that's just another way of kind of preventing the form submission based on errors. Now let's talk a little bit about error boundaries. So let's say, for instance, that I say something like this.submit form E, like so. And I hit, let's go ahead and test and hit submit. It's not happening. I've got like an error down here in the bottom. Let's see, I'm pretty sure I could get away with something like that maybe and start to type. We're just gonna get problems in the console. I'm trying to trigger an error. But you guys know about the big error, right? The error, let's put it in here. Maybe we can do something like, we want to target something that's undefined. So we could do something like this.state.user.email. Right? There we go. That's the big nasty React error that we're used to seeing. Cannot read property email of undefined. So the idea is that there's this built-in method, this static method that's available to any React component that will catch errors before they happen. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put that method in a new custom component. All right, so we're going to create a folder in here called error boundary. And we call it a boundary because we're going to wrap it around all of our components. So it is truly like we're creating this boundary around our components. So let's go ahead and call it errorpage.js. And we want a class-based component. So let me go ahead and create that here. And we're going to call it errorpage. And of course, it extends from react.component. Inside of our constructor, we are going to do a super, and then we're going to say this.state equals, and we're just going to have an error in there that is defaulted to null. Okay. Now, remember, I told you that there was this custom method. It's called getDerivedState from error. Okay. And all this does, and what we're going to have to do is put the word static in front of it because it's a class method. And all it does is this is going to get called if there is a React error anywhere within this component. And since this component will be wrapped around all the other components, right, then it will be this component or any of its children. So what we'll do is we'll console, and rather than console.log, we're going to console.error. The main difference is it puts up an error symbol and puts it in red in your console, so it's a little more noticeable. And we'll console.log the error that gets passed in. And then we'll return that error, and we'll put it in state. Let's do that, this.setState error, just like so. Okay, so that it's stateful, because down in our render, what we're going to do here is we're going to say something went wrong, and then something like oh gosh, why I keep doing the paragraph tag. Refresh the page, and we want to put this in a conditional. So what we're going to say is if this .state.error. So if it's true, because if it's null, that's false. But if anything else is in there, that's true. So if it's true, this is what we're going to return from our render statement. Okay. But otherwise, basically our else, we're going to return this.props.children. Now, this is probably the first time you've seen this.props.children. All that means is go ahead and render everything that's inside of this component like you would normally. This component isn't rendering anything else except for its child components. Okay, so this.props.children is this hidden prop that gets set whenever there's a component inside of a component, or there's any JSX inside of a component. Because remember, JSX gets translated back to standard JavaScript, right? All those elements get translated back, and so they're just these child objects, JavaScript objects that exist on each component. Okay, so we've pretty much created our component here, but what we need to do is go up into index and import this. Okay, so we've got our error down there. That's fine. Let's come up top here and import error page from /components. Oh, actually, I put in error boundary / error page. Perfect. Okay, so now we've got our error page. All we have to do is come down here, and at the very top of our return, we could have like our app name here. So like TJ's Cool Platform, right? And then underneath that, we have our error page. Okay. And we just wrap that around all of our JSX. And imagine that this is something more like a router. You could still have the nav and things like that. And now we've got our error page there, but it still is throwing our error. Oh, gosh darn it. So even though we've put the error page around, what if I try this? It might just be because this is all in a component already. Let me try putting it around the top of this. And if not, it just might be that I need to like move app into its own thing. Its own component to fully illustrate this. Okay, that's probably what it is, that we're more or less capturing things. So let's do this. We will we'll keep it where it was before, and what we'll do is we'll treat this login form like a component, which is going to be fun. We got to move a lot, but I do want to illustrate this point here. So let's create a folder called components, and inside of that folder we'll create a file called login.js class, React class login. Okay, and our return becomes just the form. Now of course it's referencing things that don't exist, so we've got to go up into index, and I'm just basically going to move a lot of this down inside of the login. So actually we can literally move all of this. All of our validate email, our submit form, all of that can go down into login. Okay. And save. Okay, cool. So that should be good from login. All right. So nothing was returned from error. Let's go ahead and import that login. Import login from ./component/login. And let's pop the login inside of our error page. And we should be good. Okay, adjacent JSX elements. Let's make sure that I didn't accidentally. I did, yes, okay. Let me drop that paragraph inside of the form tag. Okay, cool. Cannot read property set state of undefined. Okay, so our error page is just throwing an error. And I think it's because we use static. So I think what we can do here is if we just return the error, that should directly modify state. We got to put curly brackets around it though. Cool. All right, there we go. Whew, we got there, right? Nothing like live debugging. So we can see that we've got an error here. Something went wrong. And so this is good because the user is going to see this friendlier page, right? But then in our console, we as developers get to see what the real root cause of the issue is. Type error, cannot read property email of undefined. And if we expose it, it tells us login.js line 91. So we can go into login.js line 91, which is just the entire form, but it means it's somewhere in here. And sure enough, here's our culprit. There's the email. If I remove that, now we get our login component rendering, and our error boundary did what it was supposed to do. So again, I apologize. That was just a couple extra steps that we needed to get that to work. But there you go. There's wrapping all of your errors in this error page so you can kind of control what that error page looks like. Now, of course, there's nothing holding you back from displaying the error on the page. That's your error page. You can make it look however you want it to look. So for today, from my understanding, for your assignment, you're going to build upon the Noteful app that you started last week. And today you're going to focus on adding 2 forms, one for posting new folders and one for posting new notes to the server. On Thursday, we're going to be focusing on adding the error boundary to Noteful. If you want to get a step ahead, you can do that since we covered it tonight. And we're also going to talk about prop type validation on Thursday, which is just a really awesome way of verifying that props are going to come in a specific way. And we'll also talk about default props as well. So how you can account for missing props. Okay. So it'll be pretty short on Thursday, which will give you extra time to complete the Noteful app. And then I believe you submit it on Thursday. So that's it. I'll stop sharing and stop recording.